We're going somewhere. Hello and welcome to my little channel. My name is George Schlacke.
The one and only.
And I grew up in post-war Germany. How do you like my German bar decor? It's faked from a museum display in Bonn, Germany, using some of my modest digital art skills. This video is a deviation from my usual content, but it is somewhat relevant in the context of this channel. As you probably know, I'm a big fan of bicycle touring. That's in part because of the feeling of complete freedom you can get when traveling long distances on your own power. I've never done it yet, but you can literally cycle around the world aside from a few oceans you'll have to cross. I mean, wherever there are roads, you can ride your bike. It may not be advisable or safe everywhere, but in principle, you can do it. Unfortunately, though, you'll inevitably come across borders. Some of those aren't a big deal because many nations are existing peacefully next to one another. But there are places where conflicts are the reality. Conflicts have existed throughout history, and they'll probably outlive humanity. This brings me to a current example: the border between Ukraine and Russia. I've never been to either country, so my knowledge about those circumstances is all second-hand. What I do know is that both countries used to be part of the Soviet Union. See, that's the way it was when I was growing up in Germany. There was no country by the name Ukraine, and it was from a history book that I first heard of it. My grandma once told me that part of our family had roots in that region. That's all I know about that, so let's go to some of what I do know. Borders between countries in conflict suck. They divide people who have no reason to be divided except that they happen to live on opposite sides of an artificial line that shouldn't really exist. As a person who loves exploring different countries and travel between them freely on a bicycle, I strongly dislike borders. I strongly dislike borders. Most recently, borders have been used to protect populations from a raging virus. How successful has that been? Borders also seem to hinder the equal distribution of life-saving vaccines, even though that story is way more complicated. I'm not trying to go political on you, no worries. But last summer, Barbara and I visited Germany, and it brought back memories of the worst border I have ever seen in my life. It wasn't a border between countries. Between 1945 and 1990, Germany was divided into two zones, or should I call them states. There was West Germany, where we lived. My sister and I were born in the 1960s. We probably wouldn't have known that Germany was a divided country had it not been for my mom's origins in the eastern part of Germany. My mom left East Germany in 1961. Back then, you could just hop on a train and travel freely. Oh, and possibly you could have ridden your bike too, but I have never heard of anyone doing that. Later the same year, the Berlin Wall was built, and from one day to the next, free travel was impossible. Imagine a wall being put up just outside your house, and now from one day to the next, You are in a restricted zone, and by the way, that wasn't all there was. You were also evicted. There were people whose street was literally separated between two Germanys overnight. There was a border that separated the communist eastern part of Germany and the western part, and up until 1961 you could pass from one part of Berlin to the other. However, when the wall was built, they were basically evicted from their houses because it was in the border zone. However, a lot of people jumped through the barbed wire and decided to make it to the western part of Germany. It was a really tense time. I'm in front of a display about the early days of the Berlin Wall. If you can see the pictures behind me, they had at first just barbed wire, and then they put up barriers so you couldn't look across. And there were demonstrations against all this too. It was basically declared enemy territory overnight. What's more, you now had to leave your house because it happened to be in the buffer zone between the two territories that were at conflict. You probably weren't in conflict with anyone, but your life sure got severely fumbled up. You get my drift. One thing I like about Canada is that it is a huge area with no borders. Western Europe today is almost free of borders as well. I consider this a result of good leadership that takes steps to keep conflicts in perspective so that the majority of people in their respective countries can benefit. The conflict that separates Russia and Ukraine is the same one that separated the two Germanys. See, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the line between East and West Germany became irrelevant. Family ties were stronger, and it made no sense to have two systems that were opposing each other. Collaboration won out in the end, and now Germany seems to be doing well under one umbrella. West Germany had been part of the EU from its early beginnings and part of NATO since 1955. NATO is a defensive alliance that was set up to prevent the Soviet Union to expand into Western Europe. Was this fear justified? If the history of post-war Germany is any indication, then it probably was. But today there is no communist Soviet Union. In 1946, a 15-year-old German girl was convicted to 10 years in the Gulag for the serious crime of drawing a mustache onto an image of Joseph Stalin on a poster. Stalin was a nasty dictator, probably right up there with Hitler. Here's a story for all these who think that graffiti is just a harmless thing, which it probably is, but this lady here, in 1946, she drew a bow around Stalin's mustache on a poster, and she had to go to prison for that for 10 years. Oh, not a regular prison, a work camp. He's long gone, and so is the Soviet Union. But power struggle between East and West is still as alive as ever. Is it fair to ask why? The location of it has slightly changed, but there are still people on opposite sides of artificial lines that are now declared enemies, and so-called leaders are doing whatever is in their power to keep it that way, because apparently their power is more important to them than the well-being and freedom of their people. This is a complete failure, and they should be required to step down from their positions. Dream on, George. Not gonna happen. Hey, and what do I know anyways? I've been dreaming of a bicycle tour across Russia since I was a boy. To us West Germans, it was a huge, mysterious country behind the Iron Curtain. It had my curiosity ever since. In recent years, Russia has opened up and seems ripe for discovery. I've actually met people who were planning tours there, but never had the chance to do it myself yet. Seeing the recent developments, I'm not sure I'll ever get the chance. Oh, I'm sure you're welcome amongst most regular people, no matter where you're from. But having grown up in a country that was divided between two so-called superpowers, I've seen a lot of things that were absurd, like a 15-year-old girl going to the gulag for something she probably thought was just harmless fun. Or being scolded by my mom when I once took a photo of a Russian army truck on a visit to East Germany when I was probably around that same age. I was told the whole town was talking about it. It made no sense to me then, and it makes no sense to me now. What does it have to do with touring the world on a bicycle? Well, let me put that question to you. Would you cycle tour in places where you knew that the leadership might consider you an enemy of the state? On the other hand, spending time in such a place would probably be extremely valuable for understanding it better. On the other hand, I definitely dislike artificial borders that exist to divide us. I might get passionate about that at an inappropriate moment and speak my mind, kind of like I do now. When my sister and I were kids, we got to visit our relatives in East Germany once a year. Our car was routinely searched at the border, and we had to get permission to travel to our destination, where we had to register at the local police.
I was talking to your mom, and she told me that when she went East Germany to visit her family, at the border it would be stopped and there would be guys with guns. And she said she was scared, but more scared because they're kids. And then it dawned on me, yeah, Heike and George, like I've never heard this. So I asked Heike, do you remember that? And I'm like down there looking at the stuff. And the conversation is really, really important to me because for me to understand that this isn't too long ago.
Do you remember that, Heike?
Yeah, and I was scared at the border.
I can't say that I was scared because I thought if it was really, really dangerous, then we probably wouldn't go there. But I think my mom was more scared because she thought maybe we would misbehave in the car and something, and the reaction would be that we'd be rounded up or something like that, which I couldn't envision at that age. But
Like that.
I think my mom was scared because she knew what could happen and she'd been there.
No one living in East Germany, except our grandma, who was in her 70s, got to travel west. The memories of this came back during this museum visit, decades later. It seems that conflicts are the very fuel that some so-called leaders run on. They'll do whatever they can to divide us because that's what gives them power. For the rest of us, this causes nothing but problems. But you know what? I would go just about anywhere to ride my bicycle and explore, just because in my opinion, this is one of the few ways we can learn to understand one another, meet local people, and experience their country through their eyes, even if it's just temporary. Hopefully there won't be another Iron Curtain at the Russian border before I get around to touring that country. Enough of this. Wishing everyone a great 2022, and let's hope there won't be any new wars that year. We've got enough problems the way it is, don't we? Thanks for watching, and hit the like button. I know it's different, but hey.